Oh, good afternoon. What do I call you? Dr. Jean Kennedy or Jean and
You can
what?
call me Miss Jean.
Miss Jean. Oh, great. So Miss Jean. Oh my goodness. Whoa, what a wonderful opportunity this is. From the years of us growing up together and this opportunity to say hello. Hello.
Hey,
How are you?
I'm doing just fine. Doing great, my brother. Doing great.
That's fantastic. Now, having set up this organization to talk to people across the globe and everywhere else, I never thought I would get the opportunity to do that with you know. And, the fact that we haven't seen each other for so many years in terms of in the past, from teenagers to now, this is just wonderful to
It-
be able
It's
to do that.
been it's been about what? Almost 55 years.
Wow.
That's a lot.
Yeah, that's a
A
really.
lifetime.
Yeah, absolutely. Don't say it too loud because people might hear it. Yeah, that's
Okay,
fantastic.
you're sweet 16. That's all right. We'll go with
Hey,
that.
we'll talk about that. I remember your 60th birthday party. So we'll come back to that. We'll come back to that.
Remember that one.
Yes, definitely,
Yes.
definitely. So we're going to go through a series of questions asking you about your life journey, really. And we're going to start off with actually where you were born. So when were you born?
I actually was born in Jamaica, Kingston, Jamaica. I'm a city girl.
Okay, city girl.
Jubilee Hospital, to be precise.
Oh, really?
Yes,
I
sir.
wonder if that's still there now. That'll be
I
interesting.
think I heard it was, but yes,
Yeah.
that's the
Okay.
hospital I was born in.
Okay. So, what happened next then? So you were born in there. Did you actually grow up in Kingston, or what? Tell us more about that.
Okay, so I was born, yes, as you said, in Jamaica. And during that time, it's my understanding that England had opened up the opportunity for countries that were still under their flag or jurisdiction, open up an opportunity to invite other folks to come to England because after World War II, so many people had, been dismantled. The war had caused so much injury, so there was a backdrop in the population, and so England started reaching out to different countries to see if they could bring people in with an incentive, and the incentive was they could have dual citizenship if they
Okay.
came. And
Okay.
so my parents being young at that time, considerably, they were in that arena to take advantage of the opportunity to come here, learn a trade, and make it work for them. And so my mom had me, my dad left several months after to come to England to check it out, to see where we were going to stay, what was going to happen. And then at 2 years old is when my mother and myself and my dad reunited. So he went on before to England to check it out, see what it was like. He signed up to become an electrical engineer with the railroads. And then my mother came, so he found us a place. Then my mom and him came, my mom and myself came. My dad says he saw me in the airport running like crazy, running, running. And he says, there was little Jean coming to me. And I was so glad to see my dad. And the rest is
So
history.
question
Mhm.
there then. I don't suppose you remember anything about that, the fact that dad left and then you got to the airport and you ran towards him. I don't think you remember any of that, do you, or do you?
I don't know. I have a feeling. I have a feeling in my body that
Right.
I have this relationship with my dad. So it doesn't
Yeah.
surprise me that I
Yeah.
would just run and take off. He said, you just took off in the airport running like crazy. So, and I look at my grandchildren and I think they remind me of when I was a little kid. So it's
All
possible
right.
the truth. It
Okay.
could be a true story.
So talking about airport then, which airport was that?
I was trying to remember that. And we actually ended up going to Birmingham. So I'm wondering which airport that would have been during that time. I wasn't sure about that. I don't know if it was
Yeah.
Heathrow or Gatwick, but we
Okay,
made
okay.
our way to Birmingham.
Okay, so you come to Birmingham and that's where you came
Yes.
to live with your parents for
Yes, sir.
a number of years, I would imagine.
Yes, it was. I remember coming in, and these stories I can authenticate them by different people that I've met because I still see
Mm.
people today and they say, "Oh, little Jean. I'm almost 70, all right? So little Jean. But they remembered me growing up. I
Yes.
do remember being in a house full of people, multiple families. It seemed like if there were
Yeah.
three families, there were three sets of families in
Okay.
that household.
And where was this in Birmingham then?
In Birmingham.
Yeah, but where in Birmingham was it? Which
I'm
district
not
was it?
sure because we
Lozells, Handsworth.
I want to say Handsworth. It feels
Okay.
like Handsworth was where most of my roots were because we went to
Okay.
the Handsworth church. That's where we met a lot of the people, became family, and we just all kind of connected.
Yeah. So then you obviously went to school after a period of time. Do you remember anything about that school?
I don't remember my primary years in school. Strange enough, I do. I have more memories of church than school because I remember there was a little choir. That probably, I don't know, I say little, but the picture looks like there's over 40 kids in the choir. So I don't know how little that is. But I remembered friends like Radway, others. I'm there in the picture. You can see a bunch of us all taking a picture right in front of the Handsworth Church. So,
oh yes, George Street Church. I would imagine that one was, yes.
Yes, George Street Church. That's exactly right. That's the only church I knew when I was in Birmingham before coming to London. Yes.
Oh, so talking about going to London, then how long did you spend in Birmingham before you then?
I was in London until I was about middle school. I think that would have made me 11 or 12.
So you went to London at 12?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay.
And we went to London because my dad was given a position to find a church. He was the founder of Stoke Newington Church in London. That was his first church. So I remember my dad coming home my dad was actively involved in church. He was one of the younger folks, in fact. And so I remember him being appointed to London to what they used to call preach out of church, but that's where they meet, and they meet in someone's front room, and they have church in a church prayer meeting. And then as the members grew, so then he was responsible now for looking for a building, of which Overseer Lysite himself and some other people in London came together. Actually, I don't know the name of the members. I have a friend who has more of that information than I, but the reason I'm saying that is they put up their mortgage, put up for a hold for the mortgage so they could get the church. So talk about putting up some credits. They did that in order for Stoke Newington to be where it is today.
Okay, so what are you telling the listener is that your dad was a minister? Is that what you're telling?
Yes. That was his first church, his very first church, from being an officer, deacon, all the different levels of hierarchy. He was then appointed by Overseer Lysite to go to London, which was maybe about a 3-hour drive, a 2.5-hour drive.
Yeah, approximately. Yeah. 2.5
And
hours.
that was significant. I'm saying that because my dad would come home like a few days before the weekend, and then he'll be back in London. So dad would come in, maybe say Thursday, Friday, Saturday, or Saturday night, he'd be leaving to go back to London. So he was, yeah.
So how long did he do that for, your daddy?
That started taking place when my third sibling was born, because my mom had my sister at home, the Arnolds, Joyce Arnold. Remember Joyce Arnold? The Arnolds. She's a midwife, by the way, or was then.
Yes.
And my mother went into labor, at which point they called my dad from London and says, okay, Idly Kennedy's ready to have her child. And my dad drove on down the highway. And I tell you a little story in that. We would always wondered, where did babies come from? And we couldn't figure that out. And we knew that this baby, my third sibling, was going to be at home, not at the hospital. So my brother, who follows me, and myself decided we were going to look in the keyhole and see exactly what was happening.
You did that?
We did. We went to the keyhole. So we were determined that the stork was not going to come in without us knowing. And so we went, and shows you how young we were, and we went to the keyhole, but the adults had won over us. They knew what we were going to do. They stuck toilet paper in the keyhole.
No.
So we never did know where the babies came from. We just heard this baby crying. That's our story.
So how old were you and your brother then? Did you say your brother?
Yeah, so I am the oldest, and then I have a brother, Gilly. I'm 3 years older than he is.
Right.
And then he's 3 years older than the baby that we're talking about, who's Jackie. Yeah, so we're talking about that would have been 6 years between me and that baby. Yeah.
Okay, okay.
So you see, I was still a baby when that happened, a little
kid.
kid.
Yeah. But nonetheless, quite inquisitive as we are as children to find out.
I was curious.
Wow, that's fantastic. And then all of a sudden you've got a baby sister, did you say?
Yes, so I ended up having a baby sister, yeah, then we stayed in London for it was about a yearish after that, that we stayed. That's when they appointed my father as the official minister for Stoke Newington Church of God.
All right, so that like one of the first churches in London, then after the New Testament Church of God? Was it like
I don't think it was the first. I seem to believe, from what I've heard from other colleagues of mine, that there were other churches around, but they made that one the main district. In fact, they call it now Clapton and Stoke.
Oh, I see. Okay,
yes, but I knew it as Stoke Newington Church.
So at that point, when did mommy move down on yourselves to actually live with Dad?
We probably I was about 12 years old when I came into London, because I remember going to my my middle school, because that was the only schooling I did in London or Stoke. And yeah. Okay. And, I should mention that the church that my dad took over as well, the history of that was, it sounds like it was a church that was meeting, but they were going through a division. You know how sometimes churches split away and they go into
yes.
So the part that was left didn't have a minister, and that's how my dad was able to get the people, handful of people, but no building. So it was his responsibility then to find a building so that the Church of God could help, solidify the building and then create that as their church. And so that's how Stoke Newington began. So
your daddy is quite significant in the development of the church in London to a degree, then I would
very
say.
Much so, very much so, very much so.
Because I remember
also one of the youngest pastors at that time.
Okay, what sort of age was he then?
In his 30s.
In his 30s.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's quite young. But I guess he was rather determined, wasn't he, to actually achieve?
I think that he was. I think Dad was. He my dad's mother is also an evangelist. And so Dad was used to having that around him, and her name was Mother Rob.
Right.
And she was an island evangelist, so she traveled around. She'd be home long enough to have her babies, and then she'd be on the road again. So
is that in the Caribbean?
In the Caribbean, yes, in Jamaica. So as a result of that, her children were kind of grown up with through other families, the blood family, but like somebody would take a group of them, another one would take a group of that. And I say that because the section of the family that I know with my dad, he has like 2 other sisters and a brother. He has more, but I only know that section because those were the ones that they all went to live, whichever relative. My dad's birth name is Wong, because he's half Chinese.
Your daddy was half Chinese?
Yes.
Is that right?
It is, yeah. But when he married my mother, who is a darker skinned woman, high cheekbones, beautiful Black woman, she didn't want the name Wong. And so he took on his uncle's name, which is Kennedy. That's why.
Is that right?
Nobody knows that, but you get the first information on your show.
Oh my goodness.
I mean, it's common knowledge around the family, but that actually is how Rudolph R.L. Kennedy came about. It would have been Rudolph R.L. Wong, but Mom says there's no way my dark skin is going to carry the name Wong. So that's how we became.
So that started when your mom and dad got married? Yes,
when they got married in Jamaica early, the name she carried then was Kennedy. And of course, Dad's record showed Wong Kennedy. And then when he came to England, it was easy for him to just drop the Wong and just be Kennedy. But all of my uncles and aunts, they had the name Wong, and my cousins. And so we always
is that right?
Fit in. Yeah. So that's how that name came about.
So when did you learn this then?
I learned that early because I wondered why all of my cousins looked different from us. They all were
Oh,
Chinese, you know.
oh, right. Okay.
Yeah. So they married Jamaican Chinese,
Yes, yes,
except for
yes, yes.
my father. He did not marry a Jamaican Chinese. He married a beautiful black Jamaican woman. And
Okay.
so we look very different from my other cousins. Over
Okay.
the years, they've remarried and they're a lot more multicultural. But back in
Yes,
the
yes.
50s, that there was very high, unfortunately, that kind of cultural differences among
Yes,
the
yes, yes, yes,
islands. And
yes.
so my mother
Wow.
experienced that. So I suspect my mother was glad to get away from Jamaica and go to another country where she could see her worth and not be judged by the color of her skin. And that
Okay.
really says something right there.
That's interesting. So you talk about your dad quite a bit. So what about mother then? Um,
Yeah.
what was her interest, in life? I mean, I guess
Well,
she sounds
she was
like a
also,
strong lady.
yeah, she was also happy for the opportunity to come to England, going back to how she was raised and the kind of caste system and cultural issues on the island as being a darker woman versus a lighter woman, that
Okay.
unfortunately amongst black culture that seems to be an issue. So it gave her an opportunity to come to England, plus she was also young enough to feel that she could get a trade as well, because that was part of the package deal. They were going to train those who came in through that passageway opportunity to come to England. So my mother registered for the nursing field. And
Okay.
so that's how my mother got into nursing. She had an opportunity to work as a nurse, get her training as a nurse. And she's always been a nurse as long as I've known mom, but it was
All
because
right.
the opportunity that England gave my mom to be
Right.
able to learn to become a nurse.
So she's one of those early mothers or women in
Hmm.
the NHS then.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Wow.
Exactly. And she's
That's
known
fantastic.
nothing but nursing. Anywhere that we've been, that's been my mother's trade.
Oh,
And
that's
that's like I said,
fantastic.
my dad, he was an electrical engineer and started that off on the British railroads.
Okay, okay, that again is quite interesting. So
Mm.
coming back to you then, you went to a school obviously down in London. What was that like?
That was it was different because I was leaving all of my friends in Birmingham, right? All my
Right.
friends, my school friends, that was our livelihood where we lived. By that point we had a house of our own, which was the church had given us that home, like a parsonage, I guess.
Yes, right. Okay, yes, yes.
Yeah, and so they were kind enough to do that for us while my dad came up to London, and then when we came to London, then they assisted him with housing as well. I think for a minute
Mm,
we lived with the Kellerites
mm,
for a while, and
mm.
but anyway,
Yeah.
that's how that happened. So I went to all girls school.
Oh, you did?
I did go to all girls school till I was 18 years old.
Oh my goodness.
Clapton Park High School for girls.
And what was that like?
I thought it was neat. It was a neat experience. I didn't see anything different, or I look back in my old age now, and with all the issues going on with gender issues and gender identifying issues, and I have to admit, I've tried to look back in my own lifetime growing up and wondered, was that an issue when I was going to school because it was all girls? And I don't
Oh,
know that it was an issue then. I mean, I had girlfriends across the board. They'd come
mm.
over, would sleep, and
Yeah,
share,
yeah, yeah.
space, and never thought for one moment that there was an issue of gender identity, lesbianism and all that sort of thing is what I'm saying. I never
Okay,
saw that in
right, right,
growing up, and
right.
maybe I was sheltered, maybe it wasn't a big deal, but I needed to say that because I went to all girls school and
Okay,
not see that around. Maybe it was
right.
closet, it had not come out. And then my brother went to all boys school.
Oh, he did?
Yes. And again, growing up, the one that broke that routine was my third sibling, Jackie. She went to a co-ed school. And I
Oh,
have to tell you something, she is different than the rest of us. She takes more chances. She's like, you guys are the PK kids, you be good, but she's gonna kind of do her little thing, Jackie. And we swear that it's because she went to a co-ed school
oh,
that
really?
made her bolder than we were. We were more sheltered than she was. So she got the benefit of going to a co-ed school.
That's an interesting point there. Two things you mentioned. you mentioned about going to a co-ed school, but you also mentioned about the PK, which obviously is quite a big deal in terms of the way we were brought up in the New Testament Church of God. And PK meaning pastor's
Preacher's
kid
kid.
or
Yes.
preacher's kid, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, when did you actually notice, or did you notice that there was a difference between yourself as a PK kid, pastor's kid, to other children? Did you actually notice that at any particular
Yes.
point? You
You
did?
know, it's good. It's interesting you say that because that's not something people usually ask, but it really was a big deal in my life. It was a big deal even in school. They knew that I was a preacher's kid. And
Really?
so even in school, if I did something that they thought was inappropriate or wrong or what, they would even use and says, hey, we're going to tell your father, we're going to bring your parents up. And it would make me feel like, oh my God, what is wrong with me? I mean, am I royalty? What's wrong with me? Why can't I do whatever other kids do? So at
Right,
school, they
right,
had a certain standard for me.
right.
Then I got to church and oh my God, there was another standard there. And, others were doing things, could go places, but I couldn't go because I was Pastor Kennedy's daughter, Pastor
Right.
Kennedy's children. And,
Yeah,
and, and
yeah.
it, on one end, it was nice to be known for that, but I don't really know that I had my own identity until in my much older years. Because growing up, I was Pastor Kennedy's daughter, and then I
Right.
got married. I was his
Yeah,
wife,
yeah.
Tony's wife, and then when I became single and up in my age, that I had to say, who the heck am I? And I needed to find my own identity because for so long I was somewhere
Yeah.
else. But being a preacher's kid has a lot of it's great, but it has a lot of weight on it. There's a lot of high expectations. I was raised intentionally, believe it or not, to marry a pastor.
Is that right?
Yes, yeah. I just knew I was going to marry a pastor. Don't know who he was, where he was not, but I knew I was going to marry a pastor. Yeah,
Wow.
I was raised in a certain way, patterned up after my mother. It was going to be somebody that was going to be in leadership. She would say, just like your father. And the only thing I know about my father is that he was a minister. So I knew that I was either going to be dating a pastor's son who was going to go into that direction of being a
Right.
pastor or what. And it was weird. So, but I
That-
grew up with knowing that I couldn't just mix with any and anybody.
oh my
It
goodness.
had its rewards, but
Th-
again,
th-
as I got older, I couldn't figure out who the heck I was.
There's a couple of questions within that. Number
Hmm.
one, did you find it restrictive or did you know any different? And also, did you find any other PK kids? Any other that you sort of compare notes to because you were like
Yeah,
different?
yeah.
So the first thing is, did you find it restrictive being a pastor's kid in terms of a one stream, or you just didn't know any different? And if you did you talk to any other pastors' children about that, kids
Yeah.
about that?
I knew there was a difference because it was a fact. My dad would literally, my mom would say, look, my mom used a term, when your dad's going to preach, he doesn't want to preach with water in his mouth. And I thought,
Okay,
with water in his mouth, what is that? But that was he needs to be free when he's preaching. He can't be preaching and then he's got his own children doing things, which would
right.
hold up his message or wouldn't let him be
Okay.
free. So we learned that early, that dad was not going to preach with water in his mouth, right? And then we just knew that there was a standard because it was never Jean, it was Pastor Kennedy's daughter.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
I knew then I was somebody's daughter. And next to royalty, I guess it would be, it was that was I don't think I was a
Understand.
snob because
Yeah.
I had friends I connected with, but I knew I was different. I knew there was certain things I could not do, certain places there's nowhere I was going to go. And
Right.
so I was even limited in my awareness of what was out there outside of the church walls.
And how many other PK then, pastors' kid, did you know and were able to compare notes with?
Yeah, we I laugh because I'm an open book. So, I knew pastors' children and we all kind of had that mind. We all kind of knew that without saying. It wasn't something we spoke about, but we knew
Okay.
that we were the children of whoever.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
higher up that pastor was, the more it kind of put more on us as the children. And so I laughed because I remembered one time, by this time we were in Willesden. My dad was now pastor in Willesden. And on the Willesden district was a young man by the name of Kenneth Peter King. Bless his heart, may he rest in peace.
I remember him
Remember
well.
Kenneth? And
Yes.
Kenneth would always tease me because he says, I'm not going to be a preacher, you know. I will not be a pastor. So he says, so I know you're not going to be interested in me because I'm not going to be a pastor. And I said, Kenneth, you're right. I said, we can only be friends, but we could never be anything more than that because you're not going
Right.
to be a pastor. And he would always laugh at me
Yeah, yeah,
because he
yeah.
says, you did want a pastor, huh? That's what you wanted. You wanted a pastor, huh? And I said, yeah. So for what it's worth. So
Yeah.
even at that younger age, I knew it was already ingrained in me that that was
Yeah.
the kind of person that I should be looking to if I decide to date. So of course I went out subconscious in my mind looking for someone who had the potential, the possibilities of becoming someone that could walk in my father's footsteps and help in his way. So my mom used to say, you're trying to marry your father. And she may have had she might have been right on some things.
That then
But
brings me
that
to the
shows you the
point.
brainwashing that we get as
Yes.
PK kids. Yeah.
So that brings me to the point where, like I said before, that we knew each other
Yeah.
growing up in the church. But I think the standard point is when you were 16 and we went to this convention in Leicester. I think it was Demanfort Hall, right? And it was your 16th birthday.
Yes.
And somebody, a friend of ours, it was just, I believe it was Rose, sort of gave some forethoughts to it and brought a cake because her mother, a bit of a baker, a little cake. And back at the door in the evening, we decided to celebrate your birthday.
Yes.
Jean's 16th birthday, which was unplanned.
Right. It was a
Apart from the cake, it
surprise.
was really unplanned. And I mean, like, what happened next? Oh my goodness.
I think it scarred some of the young people, even today, because I'm speaking to some of these young who are now grandmothers, and they still remember that day and that time as if it was yesterday.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
And it was talking to Joel Barnett, and he then sent me this photo. I mean, like 50 odd years later. And this photo was you there, like you're blowing the candle out or something.
Yeah.
And Rose, and I said to him, who's that guy standing there? And he says, it's you. And that's the first time I'd seen that photo.
Yeah, you were helping me cut the cake. You were there by the cake.
Oh my God. Right? And then to hear what happened after that, because of course we were like in a happy mood, it's your birthday and all that.
Yeah.
But the fact that we were together as youngsters and in a room, boys and girls, with a PK's kid.
Right.
Oh my goodness.
You know, I think part of that was because of the way the Church of God was. And I don't knock him for that because I think it gave us a good foundation.
I totally agree with that.
Somewhere, you know, too much of one good thing can be good for nothing.
Yeah.
And I think what happened was their standard of Christianity and you know, right living behavior, all of those things were important. And so we're going to convention. We're going to celebrate now, our young people at Stoke Newington. They have the surprise birthday party for me. And somebody brought a Jamaican, Louise Bennett's Jamaican Labrish book.
Right.
And had the great accent, was just reading off of Louise Bennett's poems. And we were just laughing and just having a good time. But I think that the other folks that was around in the dorm, mainly lots of adults, heard all this laughter going on in the room and wondered what was going on there. And so they listened, but they all made their own stories up. Rather than come in and see, all they heard was laughter and a bunch of young people laughing, and they heard males' voices and females' voices in one room, and the story took on a life of its own. when it finally got to my dad, because they wanted to know who were all these young people that was over there, them come to church, and instead of coming to church, them in there, and it's not them not seeking the Holy Spirit. They're not praying. It's not them not speaking in tongues. They're not coming church. It was too much. So you see, nothing was. So as a result of that, since we were not in there speaking in tongues, having church, but we were having laughter, reading Louis Bennett's poetry. I mean, those were all considered not spiritual. And so when my dad got the message that his young people were being unruly and was acting inappropriately, it just blew his mind, because again, he is very proud of his platform, proud of his young people. And then he heard his daughter was in it. Oh my God. He didn't know which way to go. It blew his mind. And so when they came back from the convention, came back to the church, my dad had a coming home to Jesus conversation with his young people and made them aware that that was intolerable, inappropriate, and kind of put them on heavy manners. And a lot, he came down harder than I think he should have. But again, it was his reputation too. He's the pastor of the young people, don't know what all the stories, you know, that game when you tell a story, by the time it gets to the 10th person, it's way out of proportion.
Absolutely.
So I just think it just put him on the spot. And then as a result of that, he's made me aware that I'm sorry, I'm going to have to bring the realms in even more. You have to be very careful about what others do. You can't do that because you're a minister's daughter. And I thought all it was a birthday, a surprise birthday party, but it was the appearance that it was with the males and the females in the room. But that's how holy the Church of God was.
So your 16th birthday party, so to speak, or that particular date in the diary is remembered for, I'm not so sure for the right reasons.
Not for the right reasons. No, it's a bittersweet. It's a bittersweet. It has some happy memories, but you see the pitch and you go, oh, this is so cute. Oh, you remember what happened. Oh my God, you remember what happened. So it's a bittersweet. It's schizophrenic. It's schizophrenic.
And I'm sure if you were to gather a few people in London, because I think because the bulk of it went on in London, it kind of stayed in London, because it's not until years later that I got to learn about that. You know,
it still is. It still is. I met, you know, I'm here on vacation for a few weeks and met with some of those young people. And I'm telling you that they still bring it up. I almost want to know have you forgiven my father? I mean, is there something kind of there that, you know,
that's
what's
now
going on? They really say it as if it was yesterday. And I'm like, what is this?
God.
You're older now. You're a grandparent. But it was the idea that their pastor, how come your father didn't trust us? Why did he think we were going to be doing something wrong? I was like, don't ask me, ask my dad. Poor dad probably doesn't even remember he did that. But he came down hard. But I think my father had to show the other ministers, him being a young minister, they were taking a chance on him because he was one of the younger ministers. And so they weren't really used to having young pastors as young as him in the 30s. And so for him to be, you know, for that to be a smear on his portfolio, as it were, I think he had to show that, oh, he's a no-nonsense pastor. So he can come on down strong. And so the other pastors liked that he came down strong on his members, on his young people, but the young people were just hurt for a minute. They're like, how could he not trust us? Why would he think that we would have been doing anything other than just having a good time?
Which being a part of it myself,
okay.
That's exactly what we're doing. And for someone to come down pretty hard on you, you think, well, we've done nothing. So why are you being castigated like that? You know. But I guess when you talk to the other pastors' kids, which I have done in similar occasion, like interviewing them, they were very much in the same realm as yourself, because they talk about being, you know, put in a certain little category and saying that's where you've got to be, and regardless, that's where you're going to be. I mean, I think the parents meant well, but you know, for us,
a package deal. I said it was a package deal. We all came under not knowing what we were coming into.
So talking about moving on from there, then becoming an adult, I believe you moved from England to America. Is that right?
That is correct. Yes.
And why was that then?
So I'm now moving in. I'm 12 years old, coming to London. I'm living the rest of my time now in London at a couple of different churches that my father pastored. And then we moved into the States was 1978. We 73, 1973 we moved. That's
Okay.
significant because during the 60s was the civil rights movement in America.
Okay.
While that was going on, if you remember, South Africa was having their apartheid movement.
Okay.
Now,
Yes.
being a British person, I knew about the apartheid more. I could
Mm.
understand that, but I couldn't understand what was going on in America, why Black people were being attacked by dogs and hoses and the police beating them up and what was going on. They couldn't drink out of certain water fountains. That was foreign in my mind, coming in
Mm.
from England where we didn't experience that.
Mm.
So I'm giving you that as a backdrop because that behavior that was going on in America also made its way up to the Church of God at Cleveland, Tennessee, which is the body that oversees the New Testament Church of God in England.
Okay. Okay.
So they were called to reckon with all these other organizations about what are you doing about reconciliation? What are you doing about bringing in more Black people? What are you doing about more incorporations of ethnic groups? Because there was a big division between the white churches and the Black churches.
Okay.
And so so Church of God of Cleveland, Tennessee, because they were part of that 60s movement in America, they decided what we need to do is introduce ourselves to more Black members because we're predominantly from the South. And the South had more white people, and it was very segregated in the South,
Yes.
Black and
Yeah.
white, extremely segregated. And
Yes.
people lived that way. It was like no big deal. But places like California that should be more integrated, places like Florida that should be a little bit more integrated, New York a little bit more integrated, they weren't seeing a lot of white people and Black people in the Church of God. It would be
Okay.
all Black Church of God members or all white Church of God members.
Oh, I see. Right. Yes.
Their challenge through their charter was how can we bring more diversity in to our churches? And they thought, well, England has done such a good job because the Caribbeans went over to England and the different islands come together in the churches, and occasionally they have one or two or three white people coming through, and they seem to be able to integrate with the British folks as well. And so maybe we should use their model. And what we're going to do is ask England if they would be willing to have some of their pastors come over on this assignment and begin to help us to integrate the Church of God. So several pastors had an opportunity that was given to them from the overseer, from Cleveland, saying, if you'd like to come, we will sponsor you. We will take care of all the paperwork. We'll get you through so you don't have to go through the regular channels of like families, inviting families over. We will bring you over as a work assignment, as it were, and provide all the necessary things for you. If you are willing to preach out of church and have it integrated, because we need that, because we're known in America as an institution, but our institution is too white. So my father decided during that time, as he was also looking at his children growing up and kind of looking at England and wondering, what would be our future here? Because England was also going through her changes.
Yes,
and
yes.
thinking, what kind of future would my kids have in this country? Can they take full advantage, or will they also be discriminated here? And so my mom and dad did quite a bit of thought processing on that.
Okay.
And their game plan was, well, if Cleveland, Tennessee picks your father to go abroad, then we'll go to America. But if they don't pick him, we're also going to apply for Canada and see if maybe we could go to Canada. Because again, my parents were looking at the opportunities for their children, because things were changing, the world was changing. There was a lot of, cultural stuff going on. And so they knew that as a Black person, quote unquote, your chances may not be as available to you with this new movement of cultural diversity going on. And so America came up before Canada did. And
Okay.
so when that came up, that was when my father informed the Church of God that he was going to be assigned to America. Now, they selected the places we had to go to. Some
Okay.
people don't know that. My father didn't just get up and go to America and go to Canada, go to California. California was what came up for him. So it's almost like they put these names in a hat and shook them. And if
Right.
we're going to come on their ticket, as it were, some people went to America on their own and had to go through the regular immigration stuff.
Okay.
But my parents didn't have to go that route because they were invited by the
Right.
Church of God to come. So they got through a lot of red tape. The criteria for me was I had just turned 18. And I had to, my parents says, if you don't go when we're going, Jean, even though you're 18, you will now have to come on your own, and you would have to come through the regular route like everybody comes when they're trying to apply to go to a country. So I
Okay.
saw that as an opportunity then. I thought, well, okay. So I went under that umbrella with my
Okay.
parents. And of course, when we were assigned to California, the only thing
Mm.
we knew about California was Hollywood, Michael Jackson, all of these. So my siblings was like, oh my God, I think we've died and gone to heaven in their mind.
Yeah.
We're in America. And so that's why we were in California and not say
Wow.
Florida, where there was a much more bigger population of Jamaicans, Caribbeans, West Indians. We were in California, and California is a very
Yes.
different state. It's a very liberal state. You
Mm.
don't go to California if you don't have purpose or talent.
Right.
So I think those were very challenging times for my father because he didn't have any cultural support.
Yes, I
Being the
understand that.
only Jamaican many times there, trying to
Yeah.
find a Jamaican church or trying to find people who would
Yeah.
want to,
Yes.
integrate in that ministry. But he hung in there for 12 years, did a good
Yeah.
job, and then he got
So,
a
so
break.
at
Yeah.
this juncture then,
Hmm.
what was it like for you? Because you're the oldest, right?
Yes.
And then your siblings. So I mean, obviously there was a change, and like you
Yeah.
said, the younger ones probably saw it as a jubilant change and all that. What was it like for you as an 18-year-old?
Uh, you know, for me, it was difficult trying to assimilate. That's a very important word, assimilate into the American culture. Because what happened was we saw Black people and we were Black. And because we were raised in England where we saw Caribbean Blacks from across different countries, but we all seemed to work together as one, at least in the church. We knew they were from quote unquote small islands, but we still worked together.
Indeed.
So in America, going in there and seeing Black Americans, we just thought, oh, okay, we got something in common, not realizing that Americans are very different as a race of people, whether even as a culture of people. So just because we're Black does not mean that they were going to embrace us because we were not Black Americans.
Okay.
So we wanted to be embraced so we could assimilate, but they looked at us as a novelty, like these Black people speaking with a British accent. Oh my gosh. And so we were like this thing to them, not a person, a thing. And that was very difficult for us, my brother. I mean, we'd talk and they would listen to what we're saying. They were saying, just say something else. Say something else. Just look at that. Oh, wait, they have Black people in England. Oh my God. And they were just weird. It was weird to us. The white folks were like that too, but I
Yes.
was invested in my Black people. And so
Yes.
when they
Yes.
were
Yes.
treating us like that, it was very difficult, to connect. And then we came at the height of when the civil rights movement was going on. And that's why I brought up that history before.
Right.
If we had come to America some other time, I'm not sure that we would have had some of the casualties with my brothers. I say that as we did because they came in as Black men. What they saw America was Black men. They didn't see British Black men. They saw Black men. So when
Okay.
they saw my brothers, they only saw Black men. They didn't see
Right.
American Black men. They were Black men. So my brothers had to figure out how to respond and how to act like a Black man in America, which they didn't know
Okay.
how
No.
because they
No.
weren't raised in
Yeah.
America. So they really took the brunt of the assimilation. It was hard for them in
Right.
many ways. And I think even emotionally, it was hard for them.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I can
and
imagine.
they did the best they could, but I think that if they had their ways. They would have
Mm,
preferred to have been back in England, not in America. But it made them tough.
mm.
But they, there was also casualties with them trying to assimilate into that system.
Question then, you got your siblings, or they're all grown up now. Have you ever discussed that particular moving from England and growing up in America and how they felt? Have you ever discussed that with each other? How each person felt about that particular juncture in life?
Yeah. Um, it was hard because I can look back now and realize exactly what happened. While I was there, I will tell you this, while I was there, it was hard for me to assimilate too.
Mm,
And my dad, I mean, it was almost feeling depressed at times because I couldn't talk the language. I didn't know who was really my friend.
mm.
And I'd find that I was feeling sometimes depressed. And my dad would say, you know what? He goes, I'll send you back to England before you go crazy on me. You'll go back to England then. Go back. I don't want you being here being so depressed. And
Right.
it just seemed to me that the answer for me to assimilate was get married.
Okay.
And when I thought of getting married, I thought, you know what? I do need to marry someone from England, not from America, even though I met American guys, but they were very
Okay.
different. And I just
Yes.
was uncomfortable with
Mm,
even though we were black, but
mm.
it was like night and day. And so
Right.
I thought my way out to helping me to assimilate was to find someone who was similar like me, thinking like
Mm,
me.
mm.
And that's why it was so appealing for me to marry someone from England and then
Right.
sponsor them over. And
Right.
in order to have done that, I had to give up my British citizenship, which, I look back now and thought, oh my God, what did I give up?
Oh
But
my
at the
goodness.
time, because America won't allow you to have dual citizenship.
Yep.
In order for me to sponsor someone over, I had to give up
Right.
one citizenship and take on another. So I had to take on the American citizenship. Then I was able to, sponsor my significant other over at that point.
Wow.
But that's what gave me some sense of sanity, having someone who was of my same culture,
Mm,
knew my culture backgrounds, didn't see me doing things weird and go, why do you say that? Why do you do that? Because they
mm.
were raised the same way.
Yes, yes, yes,
And
yes.
so that gave me the balance and the security I need. My
Yeah.
siblings were not as lucky because they intermarried with Americans and they had to become Americanized.
All
And
right.
so in doing that, they had to learn being an American a hard way, if I
Yeah,
put it
yeah,
that
yeah.
way. But
Well, I
I was
guess,
fortunate in that I didn't have to assimilate all the way until when I became divorced. Then I
yeah.
had to now realize, oh, what's America like? And then I was back into the American culture again, trying to figure it out.
Okay. So a couple of things then. You went on a different path in terms of adulthood into marriage and then marrying
Yeah,
someone from UK.
right.
They then had to go through that particular um, I don't know what the word to use, but struggle to actually assimilate with the
Yeah,
American way.
it's
And I guess
assimilation. Yeah.
I guess being younger, I guess they probably find it a little bit easier than yourself, who was an adult when you went there. Maybe.
Yes and no. Being younger, they were exposed to the glitter and the glamour of
Right,
America. We were
right,
in California and Hollywood, and
right.
all they were being exposed to things that they never would have been exposed to in
Mm,
the church in
mm.
England. And so people dress different. We had very strict dress codes in
Yes,
England in the
yes,
Church of God.
yeah.
Over there, you could dress, you didn't have all those dress codes. So you could actually wear pants to church. You could wear makeup to church. Sure, you
Wow.
could get your hair pressed. So they thought they had died and gone to heaven coming to America. Like you didn't have any of these restrictions. And so, they began to assimilate into the American culture. My brother Gilly, who's a musician and was, just coming into his own in England. I believe if he had stayed here, I often think he would have probably been in the music industry. And so he went there being a musician, and of course, doors of opportunities open for him. And
Right.
again, when you are coming into your own, and in America, you don't have to, a PK kid is nothing really. I mean, a
Yeah.
PK kid is a PK kid, but they say the preacher's kids are usually the worst. I don't know what they mean by that.
Yeah. Okay.
So in being a PK kid is not the same as it is in America, in England, where you're
Right.
more reverenced and whatever. They
Right.
look at
Right.
us as being like a door of opportunity, like you've got clout. So get us through that door because you've got clout. So we get
Right.
used a lot more because
All
of the
right.
status quo. So
Right.
in
Right.
saying that, my brother, who's a PK kid and then from England, I mean, he came into a world of glamour and glitter. And,
Wow.
some people aren't always able to handle that. So it
Yes.
gave him a harder blow. He had to learn from some mistakes. He had to learn from
Yeah.
some hard bumps. And he had to grow up faster than I did. I only had
Mm.
to grow up as a married woman, getting married
Yes.
at 21. That was still too young. But
Okay.
I didn't have any problems other than just being a wife at 21 and getting
Right.
my footage that way. He
Right.
had to learn through the bells and whistles of America and
Right.
learn through trial and error and recognizing, taking on more than he could handle. And so he had to go through his own changes,
Right.
and kind of go from there. And then my other baby brother, the same thing. And then being Black men in America, again,
Yes.
is scary.
Significant.
Very
Significant.
significant. Very significant.
Yes. That then also then make me look at mom and dad. Because they've left England where they'd spent however many years from fairly young age going to a completely different culture, and experiencing, and they've brought, your dad was brought there for a reason,
Right.
and that was kind of a unification of what you just expressed. I wonder how they coped with it, how they felt.
Oh, you asked such a good question. Nobody has asked these questions of us. And I got to tell you something. I don't know if that's where this interview is going to go, but I really appreciate you because people only know the front end, the pretty end, the glitter and all of that stuff. But they don't understand the sacrifice that was made in the name of Church of God. Because my father took his whole family with him. He didn't just say, I'm going and just leave you all to do your thing. We all went. And we all in our own ways had to face this new world as it was. Nothing about it was British. And so my parents fell in this situation of, we have to succeed because we're representing the Church of God, and we have to present ourselves a certain way. And so they put even more pressure on us trying to be a certain way because it's their image and so forth. And in doing that, my siblings, my brothers in particular, felt respectful of my dad. And they said, well, you know what? We'll just do our own thing. We'll just get away, leave away. And that way, what we do, you don't have to worry about it reflecting on your image, on your ministerial. So that's where we started seeing the family kind of splintering off because they were liking the glitter and the glamour.
Right.
But that wasn't fitting into the Church of God's thing that I came to do.
Yes.
I might have gone that way had I not gotten married. So that kept me grounded for a period of time.
Right.
And so, and then by that point, the girls were okay. It seems like my sibling girls were okay. But it was the boys and being Black men. And I know now that it was because they were Black men and the system in America does not like Black men.
Even to today, there's a problem.
Yeah.
Even to today, there's a problem there.
Yeah. So they had it hard because they're coming in with a British mentality. They're young. They have not yet, explored the world, and they get to explore the world through the American leverage, and they come in. And so, all dad could do was be devoted to the church 100% of his time. And then mom being supportive to him, but she had to be the one with us, bailing us out of situations, talking my dad down. I mean, there was times dad wanted to just send his whole kids back to England because he kept saying, America has made me lose my kids. America has made me lose my kids.
Oh,
and
my
we
goodness.
didn't quite understand that, but I see it now. So really all that dad could do was just be the best preacher that he could. And recognize that, you know what, you may be like Eli, you can't get your kids with you, so you just be the best priest that you can. Don't worry about what your children are doing. As Eli was minding his own kids. And so we all had to go our own individual ways, find our own identity. So you can imagine what that was like, because up until then we were PK kids. No identity.
Yeah.
And now we're
Yes.
coming to America and have to find identity. And let me say this in case others might listen to this. I'm only talking for California. I'm not talking for New York and back there. They may not have had it as difficult as we had it in California.
Right.
California is a very different state.
Yes, indeed.
Very open, they're very liberal, they're very whatever. They're
Mm,
not like some of the other states. Plus, we
mm.
don't have a strong Caribbean community in California. So you're
Right.
losing that
Right.
Caribbean culture and,
Right.
and you're seeing things very different. It's very liberal. So, I mean, hey, somebody might say, oh my God, you're in Sodom and Gomorrah. Maybe we were. And to young people, that was great. To my dad, it was like, oh my God, can I get out of
Yes.
this city fast? But he was
Yes.
contracts. He couldn't get out fast because he had assigned himself to be at California and he could not leave until Church of God says, okay, we got another post for you. You see where I'm
Right.
going with that? So
Yeah. So so talking of,
he had to kind of bear the bunt of
yes,
that
yes,
while he
yes.
saw his own children almost falling off the edge because again, being sheltered, going there and suddenly waking up one morning thinking, oh my God, where are we? And every time
Mm.
we open up our mouth, somebody wants your autograph. Somebody wants to tell you about a movie deal. Somebody wants to get you into the studio. You think that, oh, what's going on? And if you're not
Yeah.
used to that, that can blow
Yeah.
your mind.
I
Feel
can
me?
see that. I can
Feel
see
me?
that.
Yeah.
So dad and mom then had to be very resilient in
Oh
terms
God.
of carrying on what they were set out to do. So how long did dad spend, or because I think you all grew up in sort of
Yes.
city thing. How long did that mom and dad spend in that?
So fortunately, I'll say fortunately, he stayed on his assignment for 12 years. And
Wow.
then fortunately for him, Peart, remember George Peart?
Yeah, I think I remember that
Yeah,
name.
I mean, it's amazing how people names until they come together and they have some significance. George
Right.
Peart happened to be pastoring a church in North Carolina, and he
Okay.
was getting ready to leave that church to go to Canada and
Okay.
to take on an assignment. He just happened to see how my dad was doing and how was things there. And I think in his sharing with my dad or my dad sharing with him, like, I'm here in California, it's great, it's okay, da 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 da.
Mm,
Anyway, as minister to minister, he suggested, it says, hey man, why don't you come to North Carolina? I got a church that's here and
mm,
come on in and do your thing and
mm,
make it work for you here. And so dad wanted to change because remember he was on assignment
mm.
from the headquarters, so he can
Yes.
just get up and say, "Forget you guys, I'm doing my
Yeah.
own thing." So he
Yeah.
was able to transition from California, and he liked what he was doing in California. It was just very
Mm.
hard. My dad
Yes.
said it was like he called it a minister's graveyard. The
Really.
California is a minister's graveyard. You really have to you
Yeah.
know your
Yeah.
thing. And
Yeah.
so he was so glad for that little break to come into where he could do ministry without having to think about all the isms and schisms around him.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
And
Yes.
so when he was able to, and he did good work while he was in California because people were
Yes.
able to connect with him and to know what
Yes.
the Church of
Yes.
God was. But he got
Yes.
that break to go to North Carolina, and then he was able to continue his pastorship there, worked for their headquarters, and did quite well. And
Yeah.
it was more at his pace. Plus, he didn't have to worry about his kids because by then we'd all flowed off into different places. So I think
Yes.
he was glad to get away from us for a minute. Like, oh my God, now we can breathe. So I guess it works out on one end.
So you got married fairly earlier on in that so
Yes,
at 21. So that's like
yes.
probably about three or four
Because
years after the okay.
I was only in California 2 years on my own before I got
Okay.
married. So I really got the better deal of it. I didn't have to stay and assimilate. I was
All
there.
right.
So, it takes you a good 5 years to assimilate into the American culture. So
Absolutely.
I got married in 2 years. So I really I didn't have the pressure of
Yes.
being Americanized because now I had a British man who he had to figure out how to become an American because
Right.
he's a Black man in America. So he
Yes.
ran into some of those difficulties.
Yeah. So
But
where
being
did you move?
married, you have a partner, you have a support system.
Absolutely, absolutely. So where did you move to after California then when you got married?
So I stayed in California, but we moved into the Central Valley. In that valley, when I got married, the only way that my husband could stay in the country, he had to be an international student.
All
And
right.
so, yeah, and so the Church of God had a school in the Central Valley, which was about 300 miles from Southern California. So they had a branch in Central California, and they were willing to take him in as a student. And
Right.
so because of that, he was able to change his visitor's visa into a student, international student visa. And so he moved up to Central Valley, which was about 300 miles, 250 miles from where we were living. And I
Right.
joined him shortly thereafter. But he went to school there and stayed on the dorms, was a student. I don't know if he came to be a student, but that was the only way that the
Right.
school system
Right.
says if he's going
Right.
to stay, he
Right.
has to change his visa. He cannot stay here on a visitor's visa. You
Yeah.
can't marry him on a visitor's visa. He'll have to go back
Okay.
to England, and you'd have to do it that route.
Right.
Or the other option would be give up your British citizenship, get our American citizenship, then we can transfer him into as a marriage thing then. But you'd have to give up your British citizenship. So the choice is yours. You can keep your British citizenship. He'll remain an international student. You'll have to wait for a number of years till you're eligible to be able to sponsor him over, or you can get married to him, change over your citizenship to an American citizenship, and then you can sponsor him in as your husband into America. So that's the route that I took, because I didn't want to
All
go
right.
back to England.
Okay.
And I didn't
Right.
want to
Right.
go back to England at that time. So it
Yes.
was easier for him to be a student. And I don't know that he came to be a student, but anyway, that was the only way
Yes.
he could stay as being a
Right.
student. And I think in the end it paid off. Yeah.
That's
So I was away
that's
from my parents for a good, I would come in and visit them, but they lived almost 250 miles, 300 miles. So that wasn't a
wow.
turnaround trip you could do every day.
Yes. Yes.
So I
Yes. Yes.
wasn't around my parents as much as I would have liked to have been, and neither was I around my siblings as I'd like to be. So that's why they all went in different directions. And,
Okay.
so we
Okay.
all kind of, found
Yeah.
our own places.
But you became a mother, right?
But then I became a mother,
And you've
mother of
got
two,
mother of two.
mother of two, a son and a daughter.
Wow. Two beautiful children. Well, they're adults now with their own kids. 'Cause
Well,
your
yes,
grandma, your grandma as well.
my son is 45, my daughter is 42.
Oh my goodness.
They both have been gracious to give me 2 grandchildren each. So my son has 2 children, 17. I actually have a 17-year-old
Oh
grandson. Oh my Lord,
my
I can't believe it. And I have a 13-year-old granddaughter. And then that's from my son, who's a firefighter in the state of California. Very proud
right.
of him. He's
Right.
had many awards while he's been there too. So I'm
Brilliant.
those very
Brilliant.
proud
Brilliant.
mothers. And
Yeah.
then my daughter also has done very well for herself. And she has two babies, a
Yes.
3-year-old and a 6-year-old.
And I was very fortunate to have met not just your children, but also the
Yes.
grandkids when they came to grandma or great
Oh,
grandma. So
yes.
100th birthday party,
Yes,
who
yes,
is
yes.
of course 101 now.
Oh my gosh, yes.
It's
And they stay in
fantastic.
touch frequently,
Mhm.
weekly. They stay in touch. It calls and they speak and so forth. And because I have retired, I am able to spend so many months with my daughter who's in Georgia,
Okay.
Georgia, which is a southern state. And then I'm able to spend so much time with my son who's in California in the Central Valley.
That's
The
brilliant.
house that he was born in is a house that he still lives in, and is 45 years old. So what does that tell you? It's got history.
Is still in the house that it was born.
The same house he was born in is the same house he has, and his son was born in that house.
Oh my
Can
goodness.
you believe that for history? Yeah. So that house
fantastic.
is going nowhere. Okay.
That's fantastic. So question then, you're a doctor, right?
Yes, I have a doctorate degree.
Okay, so tell us something about that then.
So I have a doctorate degree. I'm a late bloomer. I went to a school after I had my divorce. I felt like a fish out of water. I really didn't know what I needed to do, who I was, because remember, my identity was in my father. Then I got married, and my identity became the wife of. And I thought, who the hell am I?
I
I
understand
really
that.
didn't know.
I
And I
understand
thought
that.
just to kind of keep my mind kind of focused and figure out kind of where I needed to be in my life, I went back to school I think I was in my late 40s, and went back and got a bachelor's degree at a Christian college.
Okay.
They are Mennonite Christian College in organizational development. And I thought, I kind of like the idea of developmental organizing. And then I got my master's degree in organizational behavior, and my doctorate degree is organizational behavior also. It's a psychology degree. So
Okay.
my area of specialty is working with people within organizations. The concept being
Okay.
you by yourself is one thing, but when you're in an organization, you're going to act differently. It's just human nature.
Yes.
I
Yes.
wanted to see how I wanted to work with people who are within organizations. And I think that came from my church background, because being raised in an organization at
Yes.
church, people act very different in church than they do outside of church.
Absolutely.
And I felt that being in that field of study where I could continue to create, have useful skills, I went in and got my doctorate degree. So I'm an organizational psychologist practitioner.
Right, right. So I would imagine that's been quite a satisfactory route for you, isn't it? I would imagine in terms of
It has been. I tell you, it has been, because, I like to study why people do what people do.
right.
And I remember even growing up as a child, I'd say to Dad, "But why is it that we can't do this, Dad?" "Well, the church says so." "But Dad, why? Why can't we say that?" "But because the church say." I kept thinking, what is this organization that controls people in my
Yeah.
mind? So I always had an idea, why is it that people do or don't do? I'm also very, very tolerant. And I think that part of it is my personality. I am a peacemaker. In the sense that I'm always looking for how can it be a win-win situation. So,
Right.
and I study people's behaviors. And so
Right.
this area has really opened up doors of advocacy work for me.
Okay.
It's opened up works of social justice work for me. And because I come where the pastor thing is paid off, being a minister's, even at the early time, my husband was going in the ministry. So
Yes.
even being prepared as a minister's wife, then also being a pastor's daughter, I think
Right.
those interfaith has also opened up doors of interfaith work. So I pull all of that together, and I'm able to do advocacy work, restorative justice work. And so that's where I'm at. So it's non-denominational. I work with different organizations, and I try to find out. I say my motto is, what would Jesus do?
Right.
So
Right. Right.
I tend to be a little bit more open to hearing both sides of the fence. So, this whole
Okay.
gender issue that we have going on, I'm not as uptight as maybe some people would who are just Christians. I'm a
Right.
Christian, and my
Yeah.
faith hasn't left me. But I always say, what would Jesus do? He spoke to a woman at a well,
Yeah.
wasn't even his own culture. He dealt with a woman who was a prostitute,
Yeah.
who washed his feet. He didn't say, "Get away from me," And so I looked at the way Jesus moved outside of the church building, and he seemed to be able to touch people from all walks of life and
Right.
minister to them. And so that's where I see my ministry, dealing with the people who feel like they don't fit into church, where
Right.
church is really a time to come together and fellowship, but the church won't have them because they don't like what they see or what they do. And so
Right.
I'm in the midst of that. That's where my hands are, working with the non-churched, the ones that have want to be able to be changed, and coming in from an advocacy or social justice. So my
Right.
background in my education is able to help me as a psychologist. I'm able to, understand and be able to process people through a system.
Congratulations on that, because that's obviously quite a journey there.
Yeah.
And is that what you do now still?
Yes, that's what I'm doing now. I took my psychology and was teaching at the university, producing others of same like mind like myself. And so I taught for a number of years. And then when I retired, I decided that by that point, I'd already established myself within my community. So I do a couple of radio shows, and I'm able to, continue to do this advocacy work.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
So what's what, apart from traveling around as you're doing now,
Yes, I love it.
yeah, what sort of future
Living
plans
amongst the
have you?
people, I call it, living amongst the people, because I don't go to hotels. I like to live amongst the people, amongst the community, be part of the community.
Yeah. So have you got any particular future plans? Or
Um, I feel my plans are going to be just what I'm doing, continue to travel,
Mhm.
continue to see things the way they are. For example, I'm here in London right now, and I have to tell you, London does not look like the London I left. In fact, I think I got two for the price of one. I came to England, but I'm also in a Muslim community. So I feel like I've gone somewhere to another country. Um,
Right,
with so much
right,
of our Muslim brothers and sisters around us. And so
right.
I'm looking at this and trying to make sense of, what is going on. So I don't look at it from the prejudice perspective and think those people, them over there. I look
Mm,
at it as if I took a trip to their country to see
mm,
how they act, how they assimilate, how they don't assimilate,
mm,
what their practices are, and try to see where is that common denominator. One of the
mm.
things that I use, Donald, is everybody's my brother and my sister. Believe it or
Yes,
not, I
yes, yes,
call
yes,
brother
yes.
so and so, sister so and so.
Yes, yes,
It is when
yes.
I do that, I am going to treat you like you are my brother or my sister.
Right,
So I'm not going
right.
to be in your face. That's just not
Mm,
me. And plus,
mm.
I think that when I say brother and sister, it gives a leaf, a peace leaf to say, hey,
Yes,
can we
yes,
find a
yes,
common denominator? I want to learn
yes.
about you. You want to learn about me. And
Mm,
somewhere in that conversation is where I can then present what my faith is, and who I am as a person, and try to understand. So
I,
that's the kind of lifestyle that I
yeah.
see myself living now, just learning about my environment, seeing what's
Mm.
going on, and whatever advice or suggestions or another way of looking at something, presenting that and having a voice in that somewhere.
And that is so good in that that particular journey is a learning for you
Hmm.
because you're learning about people, and then you're also educating about people because of your background and your learning.
Hmm.
It's kind of like a win-win situation, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's become a ministry. It's my ministry as well. So that's
Yeah,
what I do, and so I'm very, very, very intentional,
yeah.
that when I use my scriptures, I'm
Mm,
using it intentionally. I'm not preaching at someone, but again, I try to say I want to look like how Jesus looks, and he was never in a
mm,
church building. One time he
mm,
went to church, he
mm.
made a mess of things, right? He kicked stuff over and whatever. All right, so he doesn't do good in church buildings, right? So so I kind of like that person of Jesus. So I feel like being where the people are and find
Yes,
some humanity. I'm very much up on human rights. I believe people have rights and they should be respected. I
right.
believe you have your own civil rights as person,
Yes.
and we also have our own spiritual rights. And so how do we all put that together and live together on this planet? And so somewhere in there is a pathway, that I'm on, and it's
That's
a learning curve for me also. And
that's great. I know that recently, I don't know what you've done in the past. You've traveled around a few countries here in Europe and that. Have you done the same around America and the different states? Have you?
yes, yes, and I'm fortunate to be able to travel into the different states, be it
Mm,
as a speaker, be it as working on a project of sorts, or be it helping to write legislation, supporting, change in the community,
okay.
or training materials. Yeah, and
Oh,
so I'm able to do that. Praise the Lord for that.
that's excellent. Absolutely. And again, that's fantastic. And I really praise you for that because, I think you did a marvelous job doing something like that. To go into a community and to be non-judgmental, but to listen to people
Yeah.
and
And
to
I,
help.
I feel like I'm giving back too, because again, I don't think it's coincidental that my siblings had to find themselves through their own trial and error. I don't believe
Mm,
that that was just haphazard. It had to happen to
mm,
make them who they are today. And they're very successful in the things that they do today. And they
mm,
seem to have a balance in their life. Whereas we were raised to be all church, all heavenly minded and no earthly good. I remembered even people when I was in church here in England, people were taking classes, but they were sneaking and taking classes.
yeah,
Even my dad was taking classes, and he was sneaking and taking his little classes, so because we said if you took your classes, then you don't believe Jesus is coming. You said,
right,
how can you be taking classes to graduate and then have a career? That mean you don't believe Jesus is coming. because you wouldn't be
Okay.
investing in something that is not there. That was a
Right.
mindset. You see how weird that is?
Right.
So
Right.
people were
Right.
taking classes to better themselves. And
Yeah.
some people that allowed them to go into the United States, friends like George Garwood and others who we just seem like they
Yes.
were off the
Yes.
Richter
Yes.
scale.
Wow.
But they knew the importance of education, and they
Yes.
didn't throw away their faith. But they
Yes.
knew that there
Yes.
had to be something there. Now, today, every second person is getting a degree or something. Praise the Lord for that.
Which is
But
very,
in my
very true.
day, you had to sneak to go to school, because if
Yeah.
they knew you went to school, they were saying you were being more earthly minded than being heavenly minded. So I'm glad we're not in that bunch of behaviors. I think the people in church today, they've got it made. You guys in England, in church now, you got it made. It weren't like that back in my day.
I'm talking about back in your day. We've gone a full circle now. So, I mean, we talked about it earlier on, your 16th birthday. If we look from that day to now, in terms of, the experience that we've had in life, and then we've gone on to whatever we've done in terms of career, in terms of getting married and having children, having grandkids. Isn't it amazing, the journey?
Who would have known?
Who would have known?
If I had seen this pattern or this map of life,
Yeah.
I'm not sure I would have had the guts to take it. But it has taken me to places and gotten to know me as a person individually, and meeting folks, and then my children too. I see so many things on them that reminds me of me, and yet I see their independence of me. I just see that, and I'm just so thankful. And now in this part of my life, my father's still alive. He's
Yes.
92 years old.
Oh, fantastic.
Yes, and he still is doing his preaching. He
Yes.
remarried. And so he has that life there now, and we don't always hear from him as much as we'd like to, because I guess when you're married, you got to kind of be more in a different place. And we're just so thankful to see him at this stage of his life.
Yeah.
He's back in the United States now. He was in America. He was in Jamaica for like 20 something years.
Oh, wow.
Ministering. Yes. Right after when my mother passed away, he remarried, and then went to Jamaica to minister.
Okay.
And so is now retired and is now back in the United States, and looking forward to spending a little bit more time with him in his old age.
Yes, that'll be fantastic.
Looking forward for that, where he can enjoy himself and his grandchildren.
Yeah. I've got to say to you, thank you so much for taking us on your journey.
Yeah.
Because you've opened up so much that I know for sure that I didn't know, but I believe that so many other people didn't know. I mean, the journey from here to America as a family, that's quite a significant juncture in your life. And I'm sure a lot of brothers and sisters in the church didn't know that, and it's good to have you to explain that to us. Right. And there's so much more. But, the whole overall journey that he's taking us on. But I hope that people listening to this will, and I know they will get something from it. So,
and I want them to also realize that it's not necessarily a failure because of the things that, I've broken down in detail, but the success of being able to navigate our way through a system that is not like the system here, the casualties that took place, but being able to get up, dust ourselves off, and find our lane to go in on.
That word resilience.
Us all to be out of that box and move forward in our lives.
The resilience of your family.
Resilience.
And it is absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
So I want to say thank you very much for entering into this interview with yourself, the Forgotten Generation. It's been fantastic. I'm going to just ask you, have you got any questions for the Forgotten Generations, or any questions at all?
Well, I was wondering about your organization, and wondering if it is an organization that is going to just be in England, or have you thought of going abroad with it, expanding it into other parts of the country and the world, as it were?
So the Forgotten Generations is local, national, and international.
Okay.
So if you look at the mission statement, it's for British, African, and Caribbean people of all those nations, and there are lots of British, African, and Caribbean nations, countries, islands, etc., and also other people. So it's not limited, even though I say that British, the word British. So it's international. So that's what I do. I do actually interview people, nationally, internationally.
Yes.
And I will travel anywhere to visit people. And as we go around and do talks, again, we like to link with other people of similar mindsets. For instance, I'm looking to link with a gentleman who was born in England, but is doing similar thing in Canada now, similar to the Forgotten Generation. So that link was just made last week. And he was in England last week. You know, so I'm hoping to catch up with him. So in answer to your word, it is international. It's national and it's local. So it's been fantastic to actually get your story in on this. So big thank you to you.
And we'll have to find a way to get you over to our side to be a guest, a visitor, something, and talk to us about what you're doing, and especially around veterans who so often are the ones that we see as homeless people, at least in America. I don't know how it is here, but many of our homeless people are coming out of the veteran background, either the children of veterans who didn't get the benefits from their parents because they're, you know, on the streets homeless, or they've lost their benefits for whatever the reasons are. But we have a huge homeless crisis, and many are coming from that background of having served their country. And when they come back, the country has nowhere to put them, and they become homeless on the streets because of whatever their emotional or physical needs might be.
That's quite a topic, and that's like almost such a big topic. Is for another day, because we're dealing with that here as well. And we've actually set up another arm that we've called Battlefield for Our Mind, looking at veterans and what happened to them. You know, so yes, I hear what you say. So I'm open to the invitation.
Okay.
All right. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
You take care, and a safe journey back to the States.
Thank you very much. God bless you as well. Thanks for the opportunity.
You're welcome. Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right.